Thank you. In terms of the format of tonight's meeting, there's the agenda. Essentially, this will be split into two halves. Items 1 to 6 form the AGM itself, the official AGM of the league. Items 7 to 12 predominantly are information sharing for clubs who are here about upcoming seasons and some various other information that we'd like to take the opportunity to share while we've got everyone in the room. So that will be the format and how things will split up over the evening. We've got an hour and a half. We may not take that, but we'll do everything as we need to and have any discussions we need to have. We've had, just for information, no AOBs in advance for the actual AGM, but we will, if we can, allow questions towards the end of the meeting if there's anything people want to discuss or ask why you've got board members, staff, etc. in the room. If you are here and you're representing a club, you have one vote. If you are one of multiple people from a club, please decide who will be casting your vote. We obviously will see in the background who has voted, but it is, as per the league rules, one vote per club. So before I move any further, I'll just pause there for any technical questions from anyone. If you want to speak through the meeting, either raise your hand using the Zoom function, or wave, or do something to attract the attention. Otherwise, we will just keep going and assume there are no questions. But I'll just pause for a second in case anyone wants to ask anything immediately. Nope, fine. In that case, we'll move straight to item 3, which is apologies and bonus points. So apologies, first of all. Nick, do you want to just let us know who has officially apologised for the minutes?
I've had no official apologies other than from Arwel, and he's been replaced by Tristan Larson. But apart from that, all other clubs have said they will either be here or not replied at all.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the good news, bonus points for attendance. That's a good start. 5 points for all that are here. If you've got 2 people, I'm afraid it's still only 5 points, isn't it?
It is, yes. Five points per team.
So thank you very much again for taking the time to be here this evening. That's greatly appreciated. Okay, item 4, let's move straight to that. Minutes and actions from this meeting last year. And I'm going to pass over to Phil at this point, who was actually at this meeting. There's only a couple of actions that were left towards the end. So Phil, if you like to take us through those, that would be great.
Yeah, so this should be fairly quick. I'm pleased to say that all actions from the last meeting have been completed. The one I wanted to draw to everybody's attention is that we had a request to look at the membership system, and particularly in relation to when members join, because there was a view that it was out of sync with the season. So we had a lot of requests for a rolling membership, so that when somebody joined, their membership ran for a full 12 months and not for the rest of the season. So we have implemented that now. So just wanted to let everybody know that the date when you join as a Squash Wales member, your membership will run for 12 months from that date. So there is no season as such in terms of membership. So there is should be no concerns for anybody on that point. All other actions have been completed. That was the only one I wanted to point out so that you can communicate that to your members. And that's it from me.
Grand. Thank you very much, Phil. Those that were here last year, there was some subsequent discussion at the Squash Wales AGM, and we'll be moving on to some of the output of that in due course as some of the items on the agenda. But otherwise, unless there are any questions arising or any requests for amendments to last year's minutes, we shall move on. I'll just pause for a second for anyone wishes to raise anything. No, I can't see anyone in the chat. No hands raised. So we'll accept those by majority as read, as an accurate record of last year's meeting. Thank you very much, Phil. Let's move on then to item 5, which is the league committee. I'm going to hand over to Nick at this point, just for a bit of background as to what this is, and then we have a vote coming up. So over to you, Nick.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much for that. Good evening, everybody. As you know, we've had a league committee in place since the last AGM last year. The main function of that is to support me as operational manager in the leagues, to act as a sounding board for new ideas, proposals for change, and also to adjudicate when clubs request a review for a sanction that's been applied or where there may be mitigating circumstances. We've had about a dozen or so requests to review over the last year or so, and the outcomes for those RTRs can be found on the Squash Wales website. I would like to thank all the league committee members that were involved in that. It does take a bit of time to go through these, and thank you for all your hard work and input. As I say, the league committee was formed last year after the AGM. It consists of 2 permanent members, Phil Brayley as director input, and myself as chair. And then there are up to 7 additional members taken from the various clubs across Wales. At the moment, we have 6 additional members besides myself and Phil. Stacey Gooding from Cowbridge has decided to stand down from the league committee due to family and work commitments, which is very understandable. And I'd like to thank Tracy for her involvement over the last year. So this leaves 5 members who have agreed to stand for re-election for another year, and those 5 members are listed there. I've had no formal notification of anybody else wanting to join the league committee, and the deadline for that is now passed. So my proposal would be that we elect these 5 current members to serve on the league committee for another year. So if I pass back to Richard to organise the vote.
Thank you very much. We'll come on to the vacant positions in just a second after we've done the formal vote here for these 5 hardy souls who are prepared to give some extra time to the league. Thank you very much for standing for the nomination. So at this point, Russell, I hope a poll is going to appear on the screen, and we're proposing to vote en masse for these 5 for the vacant positions. So everyone should see a poll in a moment and be able to vote via whatever device you are using. We'll keep this open for about 30 seconds, or if it slows down before that, we'll close the vote.
Poll's now live, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. You should have seen it pop up on your screen. Looking good so far. Russell, do you have a figure for the number of clubs in the room?
Yeah, just working it out now.
Thank you. Just for information, the voting process in the league constitution as it currently stands is a simple majority. But I think we're going to achieve that quite clearly on the vote that we've got here, but just for due process, we'll tell you what that is. Okay, I think all the votes have been cast anyway. Let me know when you've got a number of clubs. Russell put it in the chat, but that's passed, not quite unanimously, but that has passed quite happily. So those 5 will be elected by acclamation for the vacant 7 roles. If you are sitting here and you have an interest in helping the league committee, we do have the option to bring people onto that committee ex officio until the next round of elections, which would be at the next AGM. So if for some reason you haven't been nominated or you would like to be, please could you speak to Nick or to Russell after this meeting, and they'll be happy to entertain the conversation, because they'd always like an extra pair of hands with that group. But thank you again for those that have stood. Congratulations on your election. Okay, 39 clubs in the room, so we've got 34 for, 1 against, 1 abstain. A couple of people haven't voted, so thank you very much, Russell. Okay, thanks. Let's move on then to item 6. If we could, please. Thank you. League constitution and rules then. Just to give this a bit of context before I hand over to Phil, obviously there was a lot of discussion at this group last year, and subsequently at the Squash Worlds AGM, we committed to fairly extensive root and branch review of the rules of the league, and Phil very bravely took that on as a task, along with a working party, which I'm sure he mentioned in a moment, on behalf of the board, has led that. So without further ado, Phil, I'll hand over to you.
I think Nick is picking this up.
Oh, is it? Sorry, apologies.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Nick.
I thought I got away with that.
No, sorry.
Nice try.
Obviously not. Okay, thanks so much. Yes, as you all know, the league constitutional rules has gone through a major review over the last few months, with the aim of getting more people playing squash in a competitive and fair environment. We put together a working party on this called the LCRWP, who've worked extremely hard over the last few months to make the rules less draconian and to make them more inclusive and fair for all members. All clubs have been involved in this, not just the league working party, but all clubs have been involved in as much as the club leads have been sent the minutes from the various meetings where we've detailed what rules have been looked at, where amendments have been made, why they've been made, and where rules haven't changed, why the rules felt not to be changed. So we've tried to engage with clubs all the way along the line with this, so there shouldn't be any real sort of surprises. And I'd like to thank all clubs that did contribute towards the overall outcome of the new LCR. The latest LCR has been circulated for all club leads and team leads for review. We should have had that in the last few weeks or so. So the outcome of that, as I say, is the new LCR, and that was driven by this league working party, who are listed on the screen here. It's basically the league committee plus a number of other volunteers, in inverted commas, who are asked to come and join us. And I thank everyone for all the inputs. This has not been an easy process. We've had a number of meetings that we've had to do almost on a weekly basis at some stage. And I want to thank everybody for all the hard work that they put in. So those are the people that were involved in the league constitution rules. So what key changes have come up? All clubs were sent a list of the rules that have been reviewed and where the changes have been made. I'm not going to go through all 4 pages of that this evening, but just in summary, in a nutshell, all the rules were changed to encourage more and fairer squash to be played, and they fall basically into 4 categories. The first and probably the largest one was the relaxation amendment on the non-Welsh player restrictions. We've now reduced the restrictions on the number of non-Welsh students that can play in leagues, providing players are students at a university on full-time education. Those non-Welsh students can play in any club in Wales, not just the university teams that they were there before. So again, we've relaxed the rule on that. We've also increased the number of non-Welsh adults that can play for any one team. It used to be only 1 non-Welsh adult. It's now moved up to 2. Which I think is, again, a step in the right direction. We've also reduced the qualification period for Welsh status. It used to be that I think you had to live in Wales for 2 years to become a Welsh qualified. That's now been reduced to 3 months residency. So again, I think that's a step in the right direction to encourage more people to be playing squash. We've also looked at a clear differentiation between Premier and feeder teams and the lower leagues, with less restrictions on lower teams. The idea here is that, again, Premier and feeder teams, we have got some fairly strict rules, some of which have been relaxed, I have to say, but the lower teams, it's more about, in many cases, social squash, and we wanted to give as many players an opportunity to play that as possible without being weighed down with too many rules and regulations. We have reduced and removed penalty points for some of the rules, and we've now introduced a warning system for a number of rules. So if a club is in breach of a rule, they will initially be given a warning to say, look, you shouldn't really be doing this. If you breach it again, then a penalty will be imposed. But we will give clubs a chance, so if you like a first strike, as it were, and provided they don't make the same breach again, no penalty points will be applied. I think one of the biggest changes that we've made, although it isn't really a change, is Rule 7.1a. And this is the using squash levels to determine your ranking list for your players in your clubs. It's something which has been in place for quite a while. It's something we have been doing, but we've basically made it a little more structured than it was. So if I could just move on to Rule 7.1, just to remind people, again, this shouldn't be news to anybody because it was sent out to all of the clubs, but 7.1a is there in front of you. And again, it's basically introduced to ensure the rankings reflect players' abilities more in the rankings and to drive fairer games. So I said that's Rule 7.1a. This actually brings us in line, Squash Wales in line, with a number of other squash organisations in England and in fact around the world. We have built in this 20% variance, and that seems to be a common figure. Some places use more, some places use less. 20% seems to be the appropriate level of variance to allow some flexibility in club rankings. All clubs will be asked to do this for the coming season in the winter, and I have produced some guidance notes on how to make this process as easy as possible. And we have asked a few clubs to give it a trial run to make sure that it works. In a nutshell, basically what will happen is each club will receive a list in Excel of your players showing their squash level scores, the SLS. Plus, we'll do the calculation for you and give you the 20% variance of that. So each club will receive an Excel list of players with the SLS score next to them. What the club then needs to do is to put those players into the ranking order. A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exactly as you've always done. Once you've done that, you then sort that in Excel, and you will see your players then in rank order with their SLS number next to them. If there's a player that appears to be out of order, in as much as his SLS score is such that you would expect to see him higher in the list, the first thing you need to do as a club would be to check whether the player above him, whether his SLS score is more than 20% variance or not. If the variance is less than 20%, no action is needed, and the player can stay where you've ranked them. If, however, the player does sit outside the 20% variance, then you've got two options. Either you can re-rank that player and move him up a little bit so he's in a much more appropriate position within the ranking lists, or you can ask the league committee to review your rankings with the rationale of why you've put that player outside the 20% variance. The league committee will then discuss it and agree whether that ranking is appropriate or not. So it's a fairly straightforward process. We'll do as much of the donkey work as we can for you by supplying lists of players' names with the SLSs, and it's just up to the clubs to put them then in ranking order. As I say, we did ask 1 or 2 clubs to trial this for us, and the feedback has been that it is fairly straightforward. The guidance notes are fairly clear, and it is fairly easy to do, particularly for things like Premier and feeder teams. It gets a little bit more tricky lower down, but as we see on the 7.1a, any players with a score of less than 1,000 don't fall into this category anyway. So it's only for players with 1,000 points or above.
Nick, can I just stop you there mid-flow? Sorry, I've got a hand up. So Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And thank you, Nick, to you and the rest of the working committee. I think the specific interest in my comment was more around the normalizing and rationalizing with the committee. I found in my personal case, we never used squash levels in South Africa, and it's taken about a year to average out and stabilize. So I think that normal human element of seeding or positioning someone is quite an important point, and probably far more with newer members coming in. And I want to thank you again to everybody. That hard work has been great, and Ravana definitely appreciates that effort.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
All right, thank you. All right, good. Okay, that's all relatively good news. Nick, carry on.
Excellent news. Lost my train of thought there for a second there. Yeah, that was 7.1a. You've seen what someone it looks like. So basically, as I say, based on the feedback from the team that have tried this. Sorry. No, okay. Based on the feedback from the clubs that have tried this, we're going to do this as a pilot. We will ask all teams to use this approach when ranking their teams, but we look specifically at the Premier and feeder leagues in particular. I think the thing, remember, to say with the SLS is this only applies to players with 1,000 points or more. But we will ask all teams to use this approach for ranking all their teams. We will then look at the Premier and feeder leagues for the winter season and just sanity check that the games are being fair. We are getting the results that we would expect by using this approach. And when it's shown to work fully, we will apply it then to all teams across all of the leagues. So, as I say, all teams will be asked to do this for the winter, but for the lower leagues, below feeder leagues, we will be fairly sympathetic when it comes to requests for playing players out of order. It's not an exact science at the lower leagues, so we will be, very sympathetic with clubs that wish to put forward cases if their players aren't, as we would exactly expect for their rankings. One more thing just before I go for the vote on this. Is regional differences. As I say, the league constitutional rules do have regional differences for Pembrokeshire, Eryri, and North East Wales, and those regional differences will stay as they are. But we've discussed things with North East Wales. They've come back to us after a lot of discussion. We've decided that North East Wales region will have additional regional differences, and the league will be run more on a recreational type league basis, which means that there will be fewer rules applied. All the clubs in North East Wales have been made aware of this. They've all had input into it, and there's a general agreement this is the way forward. So we will try this for the winter season with this recreational league approach, and see how it goes. Basically, the league constitutional rules document has been updated, and I will send you up an updated version with this regional difference highlighted in it, because it's not in the current copy that you guys have. So, bearing in mind what we've just said, we now have a league constitutional rules document that's been designed by the members, for the members, and will be implemented fairly and consistently on behalf of the members. So what I'd like to propose is that we adopt the new league constitutional rules, and I will hand back to Richard to organise the voting for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Before we do anything else, I will just pause. Yeah, and there's one hand gone up straight away, so I'm just trying to spot what that is. Bear with me. Scroll down the list.
Guard, maybe.
Hang on, if you can see it before I do. Nick Guard, go for it, Nick.
Hi, thanks, guys. Just a couple of questions on these changes, please, if I may.
Yep.
There seems to be a little contradiction between 5.14 and 7.11. 5.14 says no split strength will be allowed, and yet 7.11 says if you want to play a player lower down, then you need to seek permission. So it's either one or the other, as far as I can see, because putting a player lower down is splitting strength, is it not?
You want me to answer that, Nick, or you?
Yeah, yes, please. So by all means, take that over.
Yeah. So, Nick, the idea is that we won't allow split strength. So split strength means that you play a high-ranked player lower down, and then you can still call that player up to play in other teams. So that's what we mean by not allowing split strength. What we will consider, and particularly in the lower leagues, that if somebody wants to play lower downs, or one or more people want to play lower down in a team because they want to play with their mates, then those players can do that, but they will not then be allowed to play up in another team. So they will be tied into that team. So that's the difference between those two rules.
Okay, thanks, Phil, for clarifying that. So splitting strength basically means that the player who goes down can't come back up again to support a higher team. Okay. Regarding the 20%, what was the feedback of that? I understand England are using the 30% for their first year of using this. It seems to be, it doesn't work for our club in Cowbridge, to be fair. We will be in a particular mess, and we may lose some players over this. So whereas you say that these changes are to get more people playing, I'm wondering whether these restrictions may cause some people not to play. Is there any chance that we can consider it at 30% for year one?
No, not now. The League Working Party discussed this at some length, and we discussed various percentages from no percentages up to 50%. And the consensus of opinion of the League Working Party was that 20% was reasonable. And that's what and Nick has already said that we're going to apply this for the Premier and feeder leagues strictly, but allow some leeway further down. So there is the option to feed back next season for consideration in the next half to change this. But for the moment, this is what the League Party has recommended.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay.
And again, just to add to that, obviously the mid-season re-rank rule will still be in place as well. So at mid-season, if you want to look at your re-rankings again, still within the SLS range, you can still do that.
Okay, Nick, does that cover everything you want to cover?
Yes, thank you, Richard.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to lower your hand for you if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Grant, any other questions then about the updated league constitutional rules? I will just reiterate again, I mean, I'm really pleased that there's been that much engagement with that League Working Party. It's a real spread of clubs and abilities and what have you. So that is a positive. We've got Nick, let's go to Adrian first. Go for it, Adrian.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay? Because I'm not sure.
Yes.
So, cool. Yeah, all it was, I think as a club, we're pretty on board with the whole squash levels thing. So what we fed back was, I think clubs need an opportunity to be able to have internal challenges. And I know that the opportunity to kind of present evidence does apply. So, you know, I gather the squash levels, you can just enter results at any one time, as long as the two people agree that that result took place. So, you know, that could be subject to abuse for one thing, or be sort of manipulated to provide evidence. I would like to think that would never happen in the club, in the leagues, but you know, it is there. But it certainly, I think as a club, we felt like over a summer period, there's a big chance that people's levels kind of stagnate and they don't have the opportunities to actually improve their levels. And I think that whatever can be advised on, or the clubs to support challenge systems or whatever throughout summer periods should be kind of provided as guidance as well. So that's all.
Yeah, you were very, very quiet there. But I think the crux of the question is about internal challenge within clubs and therefore its ability to influence the squash levels ranking and whether that system is open to abuse. Is that your interpretation of that, Nick?
I think that's what we said, yes, but it was very quiet.
Do you want to answer that one, or Phil, either of you? Do you have any views on that?
I think, Nick, you've made some inquiries about this with squash levels and had a response on that, didn't you?
I did get some response from them, yes. The summer is a quiet time. You're absolutely right. Depending on how many tournaments people are playing, that can affect their squash level scores, because the more tournaments you play, the more points that you potentially could be getting. But again, it's the same for all clubs, really. There's any sort of unfair advantage for any one club in particular. The more engagement players have with squash levels, such as box leagues, internal ladders, if they are feeding into squash leagues, the more accurate those squash level scores will be. But I don't think there's no sort of instant answer to this, I don't think.
Okay, thank you. Alex Rowlands.
Yeah, I was just hoping for some clarity on the mid-season re-ranking. Is that going to be based on when you fix it in the summer, or if someone's level gets inflated massively before that mid-season re-rank, do they have to get dragged into a higher team or anything like that?
It's a very good question, Alex. Actually, my thought process on that was that obviously we all have to have a line in the sand, probably mid to late August, when we will just draw a line. So, right, this is what people's squash level scores are. Submit your rankings now for the start of the winter season based on those levels and with the 20% variance. When it comes to mid-season, if you want to re-rank people, that you can do that, but again, we would need to check that their current SLS score at that time still reflected this 20% variance, and people weren't playing very far out of kilter. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure it does, but
yeah, as long as players aren't either getting dragged down who are committed, or I just don't want to see teams lose, you know, get players dragged up and then not be able to fill those spots. So
I think the idea, Alex, is not. We won't be re-ranking players from a Squash World's perspective halfway through the season. That would only come in when we go through this process at the end of the season. But if you as a club wanted to re-rank a player, then you could apply then for that to happen. And then we would consider it based on the current rule.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Okay. Paul, there is a comment in the chat. I'm not quite sure what you're asking me. Do you think you could just explain that if you're able to unmute?
Sorry, I reread my own wording. It looks like I had a stroke. It was actually it was in support of Cowbridge, if I'm honest. I know they've got a very unique situation, and it's maybe worth looking at that. And if it does risk losing their players, prefacing that the very first comment we made in this meeting was that we want to retain players. I'm not against voting as a group at this AGM that they be allowed an exception if it comes to that. I don't know if that's a practical suggestion.
I will answer that as chair. I'm not going to allow a motion for one club to have an exception to the rules. However, within the rules there is capacity for conversations to go on particular clubs and particular situations. That's the way I'd probably deal with it. Do it the other way around. I think you're right. Overall ethos is absolutely we don't want to lose any players. And if we need to have an individual conversation with a club, then let's do that, and for the good of squash, rather than try and have a subsection of a rule for a particular club that might not be valid in a year's time. Is that okay? I think the ethos of the rules really we have tried to change to get that sort of understanding in as best we can. Okay,
Yeah,
if there are no further questions or comments, then we'll take Nick's motion, which is the adoption of the updated league constitution and rules, and we shall put that to the vote. So, Russell, if you could pop the poll up, that would be great, please. Or Nick, popping the poll up.
That's right.
Grand, thanks. You should now see the poll on your screen. Yeah, I'll just let that go for a little bit longer, just in case there's one or two left. Okay. Nick, can you guys see the results?
I can, yes.
Okay. I'm just, anyone else in the room, can you see them? If not, I'll read them out. Like, I can't see what you folks can see.
No, we need Russell to put the results up.
Okay, fine. Right, we'll just, I think we can close that, Russell. I think that's stabilized. So if you want to publish those,
Yeah.
if you can't, I'll just read them out.
Publish results now.
There you go. Thank you. Grand. Okay, right. Thank you very much. So that motion has passed. That will come into effect as of now. Then that will be the new league constitutional rules effective for the winter season. So thank you very much, and thanks again to those that have gone through that process. And hopefully, you know, as sort of Paul has alluded to, we just do the right thing for keeping people playing squash as much as we can. So thank you, Russell. We can unshare those. In terms of the AGM, we've not had any other competent business in advance. I will, just for due process, open the floor now if anyone wants anything else to raise that is relevant to the AGM or the general business of Squash Wales. We'll just pause for a second. If there's nothing forthcoming, we will move to the subsequent items. Oh, Paul has raised his hand. Go for it.
Sorry, I'm not trying to ambush the meeting. I'm sure it's in your agenda later on. I just want to make a very special mention of thanks to Roy and for all the work he's put in. I think it's an exceptional effort that we all benefit from on this entire group.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we will, hang on, I've got one other hand, or is that a legacy? No, it's a legacy. Right, let's move on then. So that concludes officially the business of the AGM, but obviously there is more exciting things to come. So let's move to item 7, Nick, which is the some information to share about the league structure, and then into some future leagues. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thanks everybody for the last section. Right, well, the next item on the agenda is more information, really. It's the winter leagues. The structure for the winter leagues has been sent out to all clubs. That went out a couple of weeks after the spring season had finished, when we knew what all the results were. And basically that structure hasn't really changed, other than we have had 2 additional teams join us, which is obviously good news. There's a team from Mould up in North East Wales. They will join the North East Wales League, and that will make that a league of 7. And we also have Llantrisant. We're putting in an additional team, Llantrisant E, made up predominantly, I think, of new players, juniors, and they will start down in South Central 7. Which will also make that then a league of 7 rather than 6. Up until yesterday, Cardiff Metropolitan were thinking of putting in an extra team, but they've decided to leave that now until spring 2024. They were struggling to get, I think, sufficient players to make sure they had enough players each week. So they decided to leave until the spring, wait for the new influx of students into Cardiff Met, and they will hopefully put a team in then for spring 2024. The league dates, as you can see on the screen there, Winter League will start on Monday, the 11th of September and run through until Friday, the 15th of December. And then the Spring Leagues will start on Monday, the 15th. Can't read that on my screen now. 15th of January and run off until till early May. They will then obviously have playoffs and cups and things after that. But that's, if you like, to give you some idea of the dates for the leagues for winter and spring. They fit pretty much into university semesters, which is obviously good news. And as I say, it's nice to see 2 new teams coming into that. Okay, the next slide is looking at the requirements from clubs pre the winter season. What I will need from you guys is number of teams, your home nights and your start times. I assume it'll be the same as the spring, but I would like a confirmation of that so I can get the fixtures and the leagues ready for September. If you could let me have that by August the 25th, that'll give me a couple of weeks then to make sure the league structure is put in place, the fixtures are there, and if there are any clashes, then we have time to sort them out before the league actually starts. As we've heard, I will also need a ranking list of players based on the SLF scores and the variance. And if you could let me have that by the 1st of September, that will give the league committee a chance to review any requests to review players that look like they may be out of order. And it gives me a chance of putting those players then into League Master before the season starts. If we could ensure that all players that are nominated for ranking lists do have the appropriate Squash Wales membership. I can help out where I can with this. I can give you reports out of Go Member, and I think if you are, depending on your access to Go Member, you can run this yourselves. But if you do need a list of players that are members, let me know, and we can double check then that you are only ranking players that are members. A request from me is to ensure that all the club members, especially captains, are aware of the new league constitution rules and what's required. As I say, all clubs have been involved in the development of the new LCR, so let's just make sure everybody understands it and knows what's required of each of the clubs. That's the requirements that I need from you. I would like to open the floor actually, and is there anything that you as clubs would require from Squash Wales before the season starts? As I said, I'm more than happy. I will be sending out a list of players with their squash level scores, so you can rank them appropriately. But is there anything you require from Squash Wales prior to the winter season?
There's a question in the chat, Nick, from one of the university teams. Is there leeway for university clubs about ranking lists, as we won't get our new players until end of September?
That's a very good question. The short answer is no, not really. I will need a list of players at the start of the season so I can populate League Master. If you have new players joining your club after the season started, that's fine. Let me know. We can slot those in to that League Master ranking list then in an appropriate place, obviously, at any time. But I will need to have some kind of list at the start of the season to populate the League Master. But new players can be added in then as at any time as when they join the university.
Yeah, so there is no leeway per se, but there is that ability to add players as and when they arrive.
Absolutely, but I will need a list at the start.
Turns up in Freshers Week. Right, David Howe has raised his hand. Go for it, David.
Will there be team result cards issued again so all of the teams got the official result cards, or perhaps a PDF version of the results placed on the website so captains can print them off? Because some captains, when you play matches, don't always have the correct result sheet to fill out, so therefore it's difficult then to verify that result and anything comes an away captain. So in a nutshell, will we have more result cards posted out like we used to, or in a world where we're trying to reduce the amount of paper used, you know, is there a PDF that you can just print one out the night before so we haven't got wasted paper?
I'm happy to pick that up. Yes, there is a PDF version of both the scorecard and the match recording sheets as well. Both those on PDFs, and I'm happy to send those down to captains who can print off them to their heart's content. My understanding is that there are some hard copy scorecards in Sophia Gardens. I think it's just a case of how we get these out to clubs is probably the biggest challenge without incurring huge postage costs. But I think the PDFs are more than adequate.
Nick, can we arrange to get them on the Squash Wales website, has been suggested as well, so people who don't know that they're with a club captain or they're not around, there's a medium for anybody to go in there and download them and print them off?
I think short answer is yes, Phil, and I think it would be Russ would maybe be able to facilitate that. I wouldn't know how to put it up the website, I have to say, but I'm sure Russ does.
We can do that. That's fine. That can be done. There's another couple of questions in the chat, Nick. One is possibly not for you, actually, so you might be off the hook on this one. It's probably one maybe for Dave in his new role. Is there an option to buy balls for league squash in bulk at a good price from Squash Wales and maybe provide score sheets? So score sheets we dealt with. Bulk balls, I don't think we've ever done that before. If clubs are particularly keen on that idea, I can't say that we'll get any huge discount, but if you're interested in that, stick your name in the chat and we will follow up if there's a reasonable demand for that. If that is something we can try and facilitate that, no promises, but certainly if there is a demand, we can help. Then there's a second question from Jordan. Are there any discussions to move to an app-based recording system for league matches?
Sure, I don't know. The short answer to that is we're using League Master at the moment to record the results and to manage our leagues. I don't know any information of moving away from that. No. Phil, can you add anything to that?
Yeah, so we've had some discussions around this, but nothing concrete. I'd be interested to know the appetite from clubs to have this in place. So do away with scorecards altogether. I know there are a number of electronic systems. It's just how IT literate some of our members are and whether that would cause a problem for some. So you may get 80% of our members, yeah, it's great, they can do it, no problem at all. But 20% maybe just haven't got a clue how to use an app-based system and could cause problems. But certainly open to this kind of thing if it's what the overall membership want.
Okay, we can certainly investigate that because it's certainly, you would hope, that is the way of the world, isn't it?
Jumping in there, Richard. It seems a lot of people want the price for the ball. So I think what we'll do is get the price what we can get, send it out to everyone, and then we can go from there. Then
so if we just commit to that as an action, let's see what options we got. If you want to maybe have a conversation with Ian Davis and just see, because there's definitely a clear interest coming through. So let's do that. See, at least even if it's 10% off, it's still better than full price, isn't it? So let's see what we can do. Okay, thanks folks. Thanks for those. Okay. If you haven't put in that you want cheap balls, you can we'll accept that. We'll have a look at it now. Save yourself typing it. That's clear, but that's good. That's the purpose of the meeting, isn't it? That's useful feedback. See what we can do. Okay, sorry, back to you, Nick. Where were you?
Okay, that's fine. Well, I said that's the requirements from clubs from Squash Wales. Apart from cheap balls, that seems to be the key element. So we'll do what we can with that. The next thing on the agenda was the Premier League 3. All clubs will know, if you've been reading the minutes of the LCRWP, that this has come up a couple of times in discussions with the LCRWP about having a third Premier League. Now, there are some pros and cons to this. We have had feedback that the jump from a feeder league to Prem 2 is quite a large jump in standard for a number of clubs, and for a number of teams, I should say. And if we had a Premier League 3, that jump would not need to be so big. And it would also reduce this yo-yo effect of getting promoted up, getting hammered and getting demoted down again. Having said that, on the con side of things, it does mean there's more travel for clubs. And my understanding is that one of the reasons that we moved to our current structure of having a Premier 1, Premier 2, and then feeder was that travel was an issue for some teams and clubs in the old structure of, I think it was called East Wales 1, 2, 3. It was slightly before my time, I have to say. So that is something that would need to be considered. And also we need to look at the viability of some of the lower leagues, particularly things like West Central, East Central. If we created a Premier 3, a number of clubs went into Premier 3, that would leave very few teams then in both East Central and West Central. And the viability of those leagues would need to be looked at. So there's no sort of hard and fast answer to this. So we think the next step would be that if you have any ideas about Premier 3 and how it could or should work, David Breach from David Lloyd Swansea has been very active with this. He has some strong feelings on this, and he has agreed to act as almost like a conduit for any information or ideas that come in. And the idea moving forward would be to have a well-structured proposal to look at this from all angles, so you know exactly how it's going to work for now, how it's going to be set up, and how it's going to look in the future. So if you do have some ideas about Premier League 3, please contact David David Breach and David Lloyd and Swansea, and share those with him. That's all I need to say on that. I now need to, sorry, I'll hand back to Richard.
I was just going to say, I think there's both sides to that, isn't there? If you have strong views one way or the other, please do feed them in, because that gives us a really good steer as to whether this is worth pursuing or not, for exactly the reasons you've outlined.
Okay, thank you for that, Richard. Thank you. So I'd now like to hand back to Phil for an update on referee qualification.
Yeah, okay. So to give an overview on this, look, I think everybody on this call, having played squash at some time or other, has suffered at the hands of referees. I think in Wales we've got good, bad, and downright ugly referees who are refereeing league matches these days. So one of the things that we've been considering, and particularly you can imagine with Roy on board and his referee hat, is how do we improve the standard and get some consistency? So we've become part of the WSO from this month actually, and signed up to their process of qualifying referees. The issue we've got at the moment is some referees who are on our records as being a referee don't have any qualification at all. They've probably gone through an old system 20, 30 years ago and carry that forward to the current day. So we're looking at introducing the base levels of the WSO standards, so standard 0 and 1. But before we do that, we wanted to get some feedback from our members as to what they thought was the best option for us in terms of standardizing and upgrading referee standards throughout Wales. So this is in its infancy. Some of our colleagues working for Squash Wales will be discussing this with you, with your clubs, as part of their visits when they come around and they talk to you. So they will be asking you what you think of the WSO and the WSO standard, and whether that's the most appropriate mechanism to have referees qualified throughout Wales. So that's all I want to say on that. I don't want to drag this on any further. If anybody's got any questions or any comments they want to make that you'd like us to consider now, I'm happy to take that on board. But other than that, we'll be picking this up in the various visits, as I said earlier. So that's all I want to say on that at the moment.
And thank you, Phil. Any comments on that for Phil? If not, just essentially keep your eyes peeled. This will be, as Phil said, we'll be working on this for the next little while as a how do we best roll this out. Okay. Anything else from you, Nick, in terms of the league details?
No, that's what I covered all that I needed to.
Okay, that's great. Fine. In that case, then that brings us essentially to AOB. So once again, I will open the floor. If anyone has got any questions they want to ask of any nature to do with Squash Wales or Squash in Wales, please do shout now. You can either put it in the chat, raise your hand, shout out. Okay, David Breach, go for it.
Hi. Yes, I was just thinking of the AGM last year when it went through financial details and the funding that Squash Wales gets from Sports Wales, I believe, primarily. I noticed that's not mentioned this year. I've heard something, there may be another sort of AGM dealing with that type of items. So I wonder if someone could just explain a bit more about that. And also with Roy Gingell going now, that leaves quite a gap. I think he was doing quite a lot there for Squash Wales. Who will be taking over his job and what's happening around that? So
you are sat currently in the league AGM, which is a subset of Squash Wales. We have an annual general meeting for the whole business that happens approximately October. I think the date is out for next year. For this year, it's about the 9th, 10th, somewhere around there. That is the meeting that will generally present, does as a statutory matter, present the annual accounts. So that wouldn't normally come, they would have no reason to come to this meeting. So there's two things that happen in parallel, hence why we only deal with league business at this meeting. All members are entitled to attend the AGM, the annual, if you like, I always got the proper AGM, the big AGM in October. So that's the one that will still happen as normal, as it does every year, but this is the league specific one. Second question, I just want to defer. Russell, has our announcement gone out today about our restructuring?
It's on social media.
Oh, is it? It's gone. I hadn't had a chance to catch up with anything since I come home from work. So okay. So
Yeah, the post for
yeah,
Roy's
fine.
gone
So in
out
terms
today.
of structuring, I can give you. Sorry, I just wanted to check what we had put out and what we hadn't put out before I answered that question for you. In terms of Roy's departure, and it does relate long term to funding as well. We're not replacing Roy directly, but we have had a shuffle around of responsibilities. So Dave has been appointed head of performance and participation. So he'll have a much broader remit now than previous when he was just performance director. Please don't be offended, Dave. When he was just looking after that area of the business. Greg will be doing some additional coaching with some more senior players and looking after things like a coach pathway. Dave will be picking up things like safeguarding, our formal relationship with Sport Wales, various other sort of business related functions. Russell will continue in his office and business manager day-to-day kind of management of the business. And then Tom Rosser, who might be on the call actually somewhere distant, is now full-time club and schools development officer. So was working previously 3 days a week, is now full-time. That happened just before Roy left. So yeah, we've had a bit of a restructure. Inevitably we are person down, but that's from a finance point of view, that's what we've got to operate within. So you should, as a member, should see things continuing. Any problems, obviously let us know. But yes, we have acted obviously since Roy's gone, and we have restructures. That's been going on over the last month since we knew Roy was off to pastures new, refereeing full time. Is that enough of an answer for you, David?
Yes, that gives a broad outline for now, I think. Yeah, great. So there'll be sort of more detail then in the AGM in October, which is open to everyone, all members of Squash Wales to attend.
Yeah, all members are invited to that by virtue of being a member of the company. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question in the chat, Richard.
Yes, sorry.
Will the Welsh senior close return in the near future?
Okay, I'll throw that one straight to Dave.
Yeah, it's on the calendar. It's in September 22nd to the 24th. It's already out there.
There you go. That's a simple one. Thank you. Anyone else for anything else? Okay, if not, then folks, I will call proceedings to a close there. Thank you very much. That's very timely. Just under an hour. That's very good going. Thank you very much again to colleagues for putting all the work in behind the scenes to make this happen and put all the bits together. And thank you to us clubs for being part of Squash Wales, and we wish you well for the winter season. And as long as you're obviously not playing anyone else, on the call, because you'll want to win. But otherwise, thank you very much, folks. And we may see you at the AGM in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.